Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, evening, depending upon where you are. This is Dr. Aminah Al-Deen with Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of critical things, but also some new collaborations that Dr. Kameelah Rashad has made since we last talked with her. In addition to being the founder and president of the Muslim Wellness Foundation, she is now a, uh, I think, visiting assistant professor in psychology and Muslim studies at Bayan Institute Graduate School in Chicago. This is a relatively new collaboration between Chicago Theological Seminary and Bayan, but we're going to hear more about it. And I have so many things on the agenda of Muslim mental health. And she just gave me a spark, and I want to talk about things we don't talk about. So, Salaam Alaikum, Dr. Kameelah.
Wa alaikum salam, Dr. Al-Deen.
And I've already told you this is a family friendly show. So if your daughter wants to periodically join us, she is more than welcome. And as a mental health uh, patient, I will say that you smile at her. Welcome.
Well, thank you for that. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah. So I want to first, before we dig down deep, is to go into what you'll be teaching and your collaboration with Bayan and what you're going to give them. Uh, go tell us
Yeah.
about.
Well, several exciting things, inshallah, will be happening. And assalamu alaikum to everyone who's tuning in or maybe viewing later. Um, Several things. Muslim Wellness Foundation, which was founded 10 years ago, so it's been a whole decade. We're really excited that the direction that we're going now is really talking more explicitly about the impact of oppression, of white supremacy, of anti-Blackness, of racism on mental health. And so our approach has always been to be very systemic and to think about all of, the holistic sort of environment context in which people live and that impacts their mental health. So this is sort of beyond just simply thinking about, the individual vulnerability, maybe family history, but also thinking about, we're living in the middle of an historic pandemic, right? And so that's also impacting mental health and changing people's lives like in fundamental ways. So we're always looking at trying to understand the intersection of race, religion, of identity, of community, on how people experience wellness. And so for Muslim Wellness Foundation in the 10th year, one of the major new initiatives we've launched is called the Omar Ibn Said Institute for Black Muslim Studies and Research. And this sort of consolidates all of the Black Muslim health-focused efforts that we've done over the last 10 years. And that includes the Black Muslim Psychology Conference, Deeply Rooted Fellowship, even the National Black Muslim COVID Coalition, and, really speak to the reason that we're honoring the legacy of Omar ibn Said with this institute is to think about how much we can learn from the wisdom of the Black Muslim experience over centuries. And so what does the past have to teach us about how we're living now as Muslims, and not just Black Muslims, but all American Muslims?
Let me interrupt you for a moment. You mentioned the impact of COVID.
Yes.
And we were already under a great deal of stress being African American in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Women under additional stresses, but being African American Muslim has brought some additional stressors. Yes. Can you talk about some of them?
So thinking about the stressors for Black and African American Muslims now include thinking about the health disparities that impact us because of race, access to services and resources that may not be allocated to religious minority communities, and
Mhm.
even when they're allocated to, say, the African American community, most often when there is engagement with religion, it's through the Black church. And so for that reason, we're always sort of trying to assert or carve out understanding that because of this intersection, we're going to experience things uniquely. We're looking at now, in just a few weeks, the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And I'm
Wow.
sure there will be many sort of commemorations and discussions and reflections on that 20 years. But for Black Muslims, it has not simply been, kind of managing Islamophobic rhetoric, but also what is the impact of, surveillance, detention, of incarceration, of, sort of religious restriction, that has impacted us because of race and religion. And so you add to that a global pandemic, where you're experiencing a loss of life and of employment, of, so many uh, things that are contributing to a feeling of instability, right, and of uncertainty. And so even if under the most, say, just baseline, or kind of found, where were people before the pandemic began, right? Sometimes we assume that everyone was just fine, and then all of a sudden we
Right,
experience
right,
this health
right,
crisis. But we have communities, and it's not to sort of paint us all in a broad brush, right? But
right.
for many members of the community, there was already uncertainty and sort of precarity, and so this added to it. So for those who had even, really a razor thin margin of error, have even less now, right? And
Well,
so,
what do you think is I mean, we can't I don't know that you can do a whole community group psychotherapy, but I mean, do we come back from this? Because
I have,
people are
yeah,
acting crazy and stuff is not getting better. The moratoriums on
right,
evictions are getting ready to be up. Food
right,
prices are skyrocketing.
yeah. Well, I think we have to believe that we can come back, right? I mean, if we start from that point, right? Not that we have to
Mhm.
have it all figured out, but if we start from the point that we have to come back, that we
Right.
believe that there is something that we can learn, even through all the pain of it, through this time. If we start from that premise, and then we can work our way back. So if I start with, we can emerge from this crisis on multiple levels, right? The racial violence, the injustice, the health. Um, I believe that we can emerge. And this is actually the subject of the Black Muslim Psychology Conference for this year, right? It's called Black Muslim Freedom Dreams. So what kind of communities do we want to live in, right? Perhaps this is a moment of incredible stress and strain, conflict and hardship, but perhaps it's also sort of challenging us to think about what we would like to see different in the world and how we're going to make that happen. And so I think, part of us coming together to envision, um, what Robin D.D. Kelly says is a world not yet born. If we do that together, that instills hope, right? That helps us see kind of beyond today's suffering and sort of today's difficulties, to, yes, this is our now experience, but I have children, you have children and grandchildren. Like, what do we envision could be possible, right, once we emerge from this by Allah's mercy?
Well, one of the things, one of my girlfriend's granddaughter, who was born during the height of COVID,
Oh,
and when people got to be able, she's a year now,
mm,
got to be able to visit. She didn't know her.
yeah.
She's only seen her with a mask.
Mm,
So
mhm,
she doesn't have the facial points in space to recognize. And my girlfriend is just freaking out. She has, well, what do I do with this? And then it's been about 3 months since she's seen her kind of regularly. And then what happens is there's a Delta variant.
yeah.
So we're back to being very, very cautious. the masks are back on. And I hadn't thought about the kids who have spent at least a year and a half, maybe two, of their developmental time
Yeah.
seeing eyes. They can't see faces, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't think about that. And I was sitting up, what do you do when you can't see a face? You can't recognize a face.
Well, I would think of it this way, because they had to focus so much on the eyes. What did they see that we often take for granted, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what some of the nuance, or just something that may be barely sort of perceptible to us, that they started to pay attention to. Kids are also incredibly resilient, right? And so it's still the way that the pandemic might be prolonged, right, because of misinformation or not enough information or just not enough resources, but it's been prolonged in a way that could have been prevented, right?
You know,
Um,
we're going to take a quick break now, and I want to come back and talk about your envisioning of the courses that
yeah,
you're going to teach uh,
yes.
at Bayon at Catholic Theological Seminary. This is Dr. Aminah Al-Deen with Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk, and I'm having a wonderful evening with my girlfriend, Dr. Kameelah Rashad. We'll be right back.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an
Our neighbors don't
eye-catching
realize
message.
that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No peace! No justice! No peace!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world?
You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
This is Dr. Aminah Al-Deen with Muslim Network TV and the program Critical Talk. And we're talking today about mental health, and especially in the African American community, with Dr. Kameelah Rashad, who is recently appointed an assistant professor at Bayon at Chicago Theological Seminary. And before we go there, we have a question in the chat, and if my producer could put it up so you can see it.
So the question is, what about kindergarten's attitudes about school? My grandchildren, 6 years old, are ambivalent about school. Any thoughts on how to help them? So I actually have a soon-to-be kindergartner. He is 5, and he is scheduled to start school at the end of this month, in just 4 weeks. I think the before we help our young people, especially the little ones, is thinking about what our fears are, right? So even if we're trying to be like very reassuring and kind of express kind of give them things that they can look forward to or express some reassurance, like we have to actually believe what we're saying. And so at times we have to acknowledge where we still have a lot of fear. We have a lot of confusion and anxiety, and we can provide reassurance and honesty, right? And by that, I mean, even just acknowledging this, saying, this is a really big step. And, are you a little afraid? I'm a little scared too. Let's talk about what we're afraid of, right? And when we do that, we model for them what it means to acknowledge what we're feeling and not try to have to hide it, right? Or pretend or minimize or deny that it's there. And once we do that, we can have a more open conversation I mean, again, with a 6-year-old, you can still do this, right? They're very, very intelligent. They observe everything, right? More than sometimes we want them to.
Yeah, exactly.
But to say, there has been a lot of changes, and things have been things have been a little, weird, or, kind of using their language to describe what it's like for them. This has been a complete disruption to perhaps the routines that they knew, or perhaps they can't remember a time before the pandemic, right? I mean, think about that. There are kids who can't remember a time before this. And so they might have adjusted to seeing people in masks, or not being able to go certain places. It's the adults that are struggling, right? Because we know what before was like. And so I think the way that we help them first is by acknowledging what we feel, asking them, right, or just leaving some room or some possibility for them to be ambivalent, and that being okay, right? And to also say, let's see how this goes. Right? Let's talk about what first day of kindergarten might be like, and then really like having those conversations with children, right? That allows them to say, like, I don't like this, right? And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you failed, right? I think a lot of parents and sort of caregivers, we want our children to always be happy, right? We want them to always be content. We want to protect them. But when they talk about, like, I don't like this, or just as, I want something different, or, I'm afraid, we can help them sort of figure out how to wrestle with those emotions and be okay.
Okay, so let's go to you and Bayan. What are you going to teach?
So I'm actually going to be teaching 3 courses for the fall. It's a small extended course that will be a deeper dive, in similar to what we're focusing on for the Black Muslim Psychology Conference. So BMPC this year, the theme is Black Muslim Freedom Dreams. And the idea here is for us to use what's called appreciative inquiry. And it means us asking questions not about, or not simply to get at, like, what's wrong, right? How do we fix what's wrong? But what are we doing well, right? Again, kind of starting with that premise of there are strengths, there is something positive, there is hope that we do have, and it's manifested in something in our community, right? So we have to identify what that thing is, or what those things are. And so when we start with, what are we doing well? Right, we live in communities, and often this is the hard part, right? That we're quick to offer a critique, right? We're quick to say, that's wrong, that's not going well, this is just, this is broken. But when we're tasked with the challenge of identifying what we're doing well, that's when we're kind of quiet, right? We have to pause a little bit more, because we're not asking for perfection, right? We're saying, what are we doing well? What are we striving to do? And then, the next part of this sort of inquiry is asking, well, what are we dreaming about, right? We don't like the way things are now. They could be improved. Well, what do we actually envision, right? And then the third phase of that is design. It's, then how do we build that? Right? And how do we build it in a sustainable way? And so over the course of BMPC this year is going to be an intensive. And so we'll have different speakers, but really highlighting this idea of focusing on our strengths. How do we do more of that, right? How do we do more of what's working? And really being able to lift up, where we have strategized, right? Where we have sort of made progress in certain areas that maybe were surprising or unexpected. So I'm going to be teaching a 4-credit course that goes a bit deeper into that idea. And sort of the final or culminating project is sort of hypothetical scenario, right? What would have happened?
Hypotheticals.
So this hypothetical is, what would have happened if Tecumseh Sherman's Field Order number 15, right, otherwise known as 40 acres, right, is enacted, right? There's so much talk about reparations.
I don't want to.
But
I'm not going to dig anything. Okay.
Well, hold on. We get 40 acres, right? And according to this order, it was, in the region of like South Carolina and Florida, right? So we get this land. right? We're always talking about, there's some movements like expat movements of Black Americans back to West Africa. There are people who are like, we need to own our land. We need to be landowners. That's how we sort of get more self-sufficiency and economic independence. Okay, our premise is we get these 15 acres. We're charged with organizing, right? And actually building an infrastructure for an intentional community, right? Which will reflect the values we say we espouse, right? As Black Muslims, as Black people, as Muslims. How do you build that community, right? Where do you start? What is needed? What are sort of the critical ingredients, right? And so all of the conversations, especially since we're in this time of like turmoil, right, and of transition, why not dream, right? And so the dream is, if we are able to build this intentional community, how will we do it, right? As valuable human beings, we're imperfect, right? But what are those ingredients that we want to be intentional and purposeful and faithful, right, about incorporating, right, into this new dream of a community? So that's in the fall, and it's called A World Not Yet Born: Radical Healing, Community Building Through the Black Muslim Imagination. And I'm really excited.
Is that more than one course, or is that
so
just
that,
one course?
That's going to be this fall, and students can take it as an elective. Even students who are not matriculated at Chicago Theological Seminary or Beyond can take the course.
So that's signing up for the course.
You can, if you'd like.
I'd love it. I'd love it.
Oh, we would have so much fun.
I'm signing up for this course.
Yes. So it's going to incorporate.
What else are you teaching?
Yeah. So that course is going to incorporate, conversation around like identity and religion and community building, sustainability, and the winter term, which is called the J term, the intensive. I'm teaching a course called In Jesus' Name: The Psychology of Christian Hegemony and Religious Oppression in the United States, and that course is, from a psychosocial perspective, looking at, what is the impact of white Christian nationalism, of, Christian privilege on religious minorities, and what is internalized, right, as a result of those oppressions. And then what is the opportunity or the pathways for healing, right, around that, related to identity and religion. In the spring, I'm teaching a full course, Black Muslim psychology. And so the conference is, allows for us to kind of touch on some of these points. But now that we're in our 6th year, we've done a lot of thinking about what actually constitutes Black Muslim psychology, right? What are we referring to? And so this is looking at, again, not simply, the ways that the communities have been marginalized, but that we've built many things, right? We've been very creative, very resourceful, very joyful, and celebrating who we are. And that's also part of the psychology, right? That's part of how we envision ourselves. That's part of what we want to be able to share with the world. And so that course is called Deeply Rooted: Exploring Black Muslim Psychology, Activism, and Healing.
Okay, can you say again, so my producer can capture the things about the Black Muslim Psychology Conference this summer? I think it'll be very important. And it's also very important that all of us support it. Is it? Please tell me.
So if you go to blackmuslimpsychology.org, there is information on the website. This year, it's organized as a fall course intensive. So it's about 10 to 12 weeks, and it'll be primarily virtual, but it'll be panels, small group discussions.
When does this start?
This starts August 20th.
Oh, thank God, I didn't miss it. Okay.
No, August 20th through November 12th. And the reason that we chose August 20th, that is the eve of the anniversary of Nat Turner's Rebellion. It is also the eve of the Haitian Revolution. It is also the eve in which those 20 some odd Negroes landed in the United States on board that ship. So we're looking at, the significance of that date, and November 12th being the day, unfortunately, Nat Turner was hanged. But our perspective is that wasn't a failed rebellion, right? That it did catalyze so much and impacted American history in a really profound way. And so perhaps what our responsibility now is to, how do we engage in rebellion in our own lives? Even if that is to reject white supremacy, that is to reject, anti-Muslim bigotry, we have to do that internally, right, within our own psychology, before we can really be as effective out in the world as we would like. And to just imagine possibilities, right? Just, without restriction, just to kind of delve into the spirit of creativity, of possibility, so that we can kind of emerge from this time in better ways, hopefully.
Okay, we're going to take another break, and I want to come back and dig a little deeper in some things that you can think of, positive ways that we can discuss them that would make our communities healthier. This is Dr. Aminah Al-Deen for Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk, and I'm having one of my rare, but oh my God, so honorable times with Dr. Kameelah Rashad. You don't know how hard this woman is to catch, but she's up the road from me. I will just show up on her door. We'll be right back.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is really smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
This is Dr. Aminah Al-Deen, and we're really talking about mental health and the positive things that we do and the things that we now have time to do better with Dr. Kameelah Rashad. I need a 2-hour program, so maybe I'll just have a seminar and get it on. But we do a lot of things better, but there's some pinpointed things that Dr. Deborah Majid pointed out to me that never are said on the minbar. We want to have healthy families. We want to have great relationships, but we don't work on them with an impetus and a direction from the imams. And so, and part of this COVID time, I cajole some of my colleagues to write a thing on marriage and divorce, but and that we need to say more, and we're going to work on saying more. But I think those things are pivotal, and there's some things that we must acknowledge. That in the African American community, the women tend to still be more educated. They tend to have the potential to make more money. And even when men are well educated, the society in both feet comes down on them so that they're sometimes not able to realize that potential. And I'm wondering, how do we first pick a couple of things that we can work on with this healthy family stuff? And one of the things I know is good communication.
Yes, absolutely.
So, well, I know you got a lot to say.
Yes, I do. First, two things that first came to mind when you started to speak is that the imam can provide certain kind of direction, but we also have to be open to where else can we find sort of sources of wisdom, but also strategy, right, for how we can have the type of families that we say we desire.
Right.
And I think, maybe as a precursor to thinking about communication is thinking about emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Like how were we taught to, and this is what I said when the viewer asked the question about the 6-year-old and kindergarten is, as adults, do we feel that we have a good grasp of emotional language to describe the kind of experiences that we're having internally? Right?
Right.
If we're constantly saying, well, I'm just so upset, I'm just so angry, right? I'm so mad. Well, maybe the person is really embarrassed or feeling humiliated, right? Maybe they're feeling disrespected. Maybe they're feeling betrayed, right? And so when we don't have a even sort of proficiency in a language that would allow us to even explain or share with someone what we're feeling, then we're going to have many more sort of communication difficulties than if we were able to sort of identify. And so when we're teaching emotional intelligence, right, that includes self-awareness, right? What am I feeling and why, right? And so many arguments happen because people don't know how to answer that question, right? Perhaps the reason that you're upset is not because of, say, what your partner has said or partner has done, but it's triggered something within you from earlier, right? Maybe from a prior relationship that is unresolved. And now it is playing out in this present scenario, right? So if we're able, and I think more so when it comes to emotional intelligence, talking about that with men, right? Because we're also kind of playing into some of these tropes around men being stoic and providing for their families, and maybe the mom does the nurturing and the affectionate caretaking. Well, one, that is not even what we know of our prophetic example.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know where that came from, Ozzie and Harriet or somewhere.
Well, I mean, it comes from a very sort of white Western centric idea of what men are supposed to be. And so I think the challenge that we have specifically as Black and African American Muslims is that we've internalized so much that we haven't recognized, right, or identified as problematic, right? So it falls under sometimes the guise of, well, this is sort of the proper way we're supposed to be Muslims, right? With sort of, these sort of religious gender roles. And it's like, well, no, because of the context in which we live as Black people, maybe both partners have to work, right? People have to contribute, right, to the economic stability of the family. And what I would say is that we need to decide how we want to structure and organize and run our own families, and think about how we reject those things that actually do not serve us well, right? But we cling to for many reasons. And so if we think about communication, emotional intelligence, and also that the traumas and the mental health issues that plague our families, we have to be very honest about, right? We're talking about generations, perhaps, of just, even if it's just disappointment, right? If it's,
and loss.
And loss.
There's
Absolutely.
murders and incarcerations and all kinds of things all around us.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't, part of, I think, the emotional intelligence for us as Black people, as Black Muslims, is recognizing that the loss doesn't mean that we're defective or that we failed, right? The losses we've experienced are a part of the systematic oppression that we've had to endure. And we also decide right? And you know, I've come to a place, especially in the last, you know, even in my own changes in my life over these last 18 months, is we can both acknowledge what has happened to us that is beyond our control, right?
Yeah.
And we can also decide, like, what do I do with this moment and the agency I do have, right?
Yeah.
Do I decide that, yes, I'm going to recognize how painful the losses are in my life, and I'm going to decide that I will turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will decide that I will, you know, be more vulnerable with my friends so that I can get the support that I need.
Right.
That I will be more honest with myself about maybe expectations that I had set that maybe were actually not feasible, so they needed to be scaled back, right? So I think with our communities, part of it is acknowledging what has been outside of our control, what has been painful, what has been traumatic, and where we also have the possibility to decide that we want something different for ourselves, right?
Mm.
And then, you know, to call on the resources and, you know, the intellect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in order to actually build that to fruition, right? Not just to talk about it. So if we're saying we want healthy families, we want healthy children, well, it starts with, you know, doing, you know, a process of like self-reflection and inventory, right? To
Right.
say, well, again, what are we doing well? Yes. And where do we continue to fall into a pattern that is just not working, is counterproductive, is problematic, but we keep going back to it, right? Why is there a need there? And perhaps the need is to avoid, right, acknowledging the grief and the loss and the trauma. So we want to pretend. But we have to be able to, I think, hold both the systematic impact, right, of what we're facing, and then where is their personal agency that we have to start making different decisions and being, I think, more strategic, right, about what we're emphasizing in our communities. And it really, I think the shift has to be around wellness, emotional intelligence, around conflict resolution, right? Around learning how people take responsibility for themselves, right? And the decisions that they make and how they impact other people. So I think we have a lot of work that we can do, you know, kind of on our insides,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
The
simultaneously.
hard work. Yeah.
Hard work. Yes. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Say one more time about this Black Psychology Conference. I don't want people to
Yeah.
forget this because I'm
Yes.
straight from this program to my computer and put a dingy and how much it cost. And as outsiders, you said 12 weeks?
So the intensive, and it won't be like weekly, every week that you have to sort of log in. I think people are a little fatigued with, you know, having to, you know, log into Zoom and whatnot. But what we're going to have on August 20th, a webinar that gives people, you know, more of an understanding of this concept that we're, you know, it's a challenge, right, for us to sort of think about what are those freedom dreams? What is the world that we want to imagine? What is the
Mhm.
communities, right, that we
Yes.
want to be a part of? And what do they look like? Right. And so moving from sort of theoretical, like, you know, I know that there's a community in which I can, the question that we ask is this, right? Imagine the year 2041. That's 20 years from now, right? You are a member of a community that you love, right?
Mhm.
That it brings you joy. You're so proud of it. What about that community, right, makes you feel proud, right? Why is it a community that you feel like you belong to and that every person is treated with compassion and respect and love, right?
Okay.
How would you describe that community to someone else, right? Imagine that you're there 20 years from now. And so we're starting from that. So on August 20th, we're going to have a full discussion, right, and really challenge people to think about possibility. And, you know, perhaps for some, that is thinking that they want to do about it. So they may not want to sign up for the intensive. There will be subsequent discussions that we have to really kind of nudge people to think about, you know, the world that could be, right? And what work it will take in order for us to get there. So Black Muslim
How much?
Psychology.
How much?
So for that webinar, right? For the one sort of evening webinar, the registration will be about $15, right?
That's dirt cheap.
Well, because we want to invite people in, right? Some people may be a little skeptical. We don't know what this freedom dream thing she's talking about. So, I just want to hear a little bit more.
Tell everybody.
So for the intensive, and this will include, we're going to be inviting a lot of scholars, but also just community members, right? To have discussions. This is not just, the supposed sort of learned people, just telling other people what they should do or what they should think. We want to invite people into discussion, and we really wholeheartedly believe that everyone has something of value to contribute. So over the course of this 10 to 12 weeks, that intensive, the BMPC 2021 Fall Intensive, the cost of that registration will be $250. So that was, well, because we know
it's like group therapy.
I think it will be. So, we want people to feel that, every single year of the conference, right? Our price point has been, how do we invite as many people in as possible, right? But we also want it to be something that you're committed to, right? That you're saying, I'm going to invest in this time and in this experience.
Right.
So, so that's where we are for this year. And the details about the registration, the 1 day sort of webinar and the intensive, that's going to go live, inshallah, this week. So we want as many people to come along with us, we said, on this journey. And I think it will be therapeutic.
The website is blackpsychology.com.
blackmuslimpsychology.org.
blackmuslimpsychology.com.
And .org. Muslim Psychology, blackmuslimpsychology.org.
I did it. I messed up.
Well, your producer has it right.
.org. As usual, on the rare occasion that I can catch you, we have run out of time. And I'm going to try my best, and I hope that those that are listening get on blackmuslimpsychology.org and join me in learning something. Probably the test I will stress. Anyway.
Well, but even we will even imagine a different way, right, of assessing learning.
Yeah.
So we don't have to stress about tests.
There you go.
But we want people to really think about this idea of, imagining what, Lucille Clifton says, we cannot create what we can't imagine, right? And so as much as we say we desire to be in community and to be in healthy communities and families, if we've not given enough thought to what that might actually look like, we're just gonna replicate what we know. Right.
Okay.
Problems and all.
Your courses at Bayan are going to be virtual also?
The winter, well, this fall and winter will be virtual. Next spring, actually, it depends, right, on what's happening in the world.
Exactly. So how can we not enrolled in Bayan take some of these courses?
So the option is called Distant Scholar. So for those that want to matriculate into this fall course, A World Not Yet Born, we're focusing on the Black Muslim imagination. And also for the winter, I'll be teaching Christian hegemony and religious oppression. And then the spring, Black Muslim psychology. There's an option called Distant Scholar. So I'm going to find the link for that, and I'm going to send it over to you. So folks who are interested, they can go to the Chicago Theological Seminary schedule courses website, schedule courses, and those should be up there.
This has been too darn short, as usual. I want to thank Dr. Kameelah Rashad for some insightful stuff. She does
No,
too much.
no.
I don't know. We need to clone her. This is Dr. Aminah Al-Deen from Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk, and the talk hasn't been long enough. Salaam alaikum.